Hey, what is going on everybody, and welcome to Fantasia. For today, we're going to be jumping into another session of Epic 7. Now today, got a more discussion-based video for you guys. Now, this video is going to help those of you who are really new to the game, or who are just really strapped on resources and want to know what to prioritize with the upcoming double collaboration. Now, to just clear the air about this, I know that many people were upset when the double collaboration was announced. We're going to be getting a Guilty Gear rerun and a ReZero rerun, and I would think that the reason for this is kind of obvious, but people are just saying that, you know, Smilegate's trying to do a little cash grab action here. While the timing is definitely pretty bad because we just had back-to-back limited summer banners, this is kind of necessary for a game like E7 to rerun limited collaboration units like this, so that newer servers, in this case the China server, can catch up. In a PvE-oriented game, it could be argued that it's fine to be behind by a few months or a year or so. Fate Grand Order does that with their global server being 2 years behind the JP server. But in a PvP-oriented game like Epic 7, you really can't do that, because if those players are going to be competing in RTA, they need to have access to the units, and, you know, in order to fairly compete, especially if some of them are pretty crucial for certain team comps. And we'll get into that when we talk about all the units and artifacts, but just wanted to clear the air about that before we begin. Another disclaimer is that I want to make sure you guys know that this is before any news, other than the fact that these banners are going to get rerun, has come out. So if later down the line we see that, hey, they're actually going to release EEs for the Guilty Gear ReZero units, this does not factor any of that into play because, well, there's no news of it as of recording today. So let's go ahead and jump into this. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about the Guilty Gear units and their artifacts, and then we're going to talk about ReZero units and their artifacts, and what you should prioritize if you're a new player, a free-to-play player, or if you're a player that just kind of has, like, not enough resources, right? Like, you're kind of broke on Sky Stones, and you're low on, you know, materials and things like that. So, let's start with the Guilty Gear units here. We got Soul Bad Guy, and he's the free unit, so you're going to get him, and you can SSS him and his artifact just by playing through the side story, which is fantastic. So Soul is actually pretty good in PvE content. He's great in things like Abyss. You can use him in expeditions, and you can use him in hunts like for Golem, and you can use him in a wide variety of content outside of that as well. Challenge stages such as, what is it called? The Advent stages, sometimes when there's a Earth boss or something like that. Soul is actually pretty decent, right? But make sure to just play through his side story and SSS him. By imprinting him here, you do get free epic spirit blooms, enough so that you can actually just 6-star a unit of your choice, so don't miss out. Next up, we have Elfelt, so one of the first units that you can actually summon for here in this list. Elfelt is a unit that's used in more aggro and cleave-based playstyles. So if you're playing fast and you want to have an enabler, who can run Guiding Light, by the way, because she is a ranger, then Elfelt could be okay for you. Now, do I recommend going for her if you're really strapped on resources? No, unless of course she's one of your favorite units, or favorite characters from the Guilty Gear franchise, then by all means go for it. I always say to prioritize your favorite units over things that are, you know, more or less viable. Now, Elfelt is pretty decent, however, she does have her flaws. With things like her S3, she does ignore resist if you soul burn, which is quite nice, but the fact that she, if you don't soul burn, has a lot of extra steps to get 15%ed in, makes her a little inconsistent outside of team comps with mages, right? Overall, she's not very viable in the whole PvP scene, especially in RTA. Some people do use her as a pocket pick though, so do keep that in mind. If you want to, you know, squeeze her into your playstyles, you can go for it, but in my opinion, if you're not going to be playing aggro or cleave, or, you know, you're just not very into this whole playstyle, then just ignore her. She's not very necessary. Next up, we have Dizzy. Used to be such a menace back in the day with her crippling debuffs on her S3, but she's you know, fallen off quite a bit since then. We have things like Ed and Champion Zerato, who can just take all the debuffs, right? Dilibet, who doesn't care and can cleanse the team. On the topic of cleansers, we got Mediator Coward, we got Destina, we got so many viable units that can just really put a damper on Dizzy's whole playstyle. Now, she's still a great 4th or 5th pick. You can build her in a variety of different ways. She can be built fast to debuff teams that don't have cleansers early on. She can be built slow, bulky, and on counter set to kind of play control for the long haul. But overall, pretty decent unit for things like PvE as well. You can use her to cheese some Abyss stages too. Quite nice, but issue requirement? No, not at all. She is a pretty low priority unit, I would say, as well. Her time has kind of come and gone in the past, and I don't see her having a resurgence anytime soon in the meta. So, Elfel and Dizzy, pretty low priorities. Baiken up next, probably one of the most popular units from the Guilty Gear collaboration prior to Jacko's buff, but Baiken's used primarily in a Banshee 13 one-shot team. You probably see a bunch of Baiken teams running around all over YouTube. Personally, I don't use Baiken, mine's not even built, but that's pretty much all she's really used for. You can maybe build her for like a cheese comp in PvP, but she's kind of hard to utilize there just based on her stat lines and her kit being kind of one-dimensional. But Baiken, if you want alternatives, the ReZero rerun that's coming out gives you a free ROM, and ROM is actually very much capable of one-shotting Banshee 13 as well, and she's free. So Baiken probably on the bottom in terms of priority as well, because again, Banshee 13 one-shot is so accessible nowadays with so many different units. You can use Euphine, you can use Ervelyn, the list goes on. So again, Baiken, not a huge priority. So far, looking pretty good. Next up, we have Jacko. So Jacko recently got buffed, and honestly, she is probably the best out of the Guilty Gear bunch in terms of meta viability. She is used in aggro and in cleave, and she can pretty much decimate team comps with her S3, especially because she penetrates defense, self-buffs attack, and increases combat readiness for your whole team if she defeats somebody. Her passive's also pretty good, helping support the backline unit, giving them extra chances to stun with the Chains of Chiron. And her S1 is also pretty annoying because not only does it have a chance to stun, but it has a Dust Devil-like effect where you attack the opponent, and if they're debuffed, you'll get to attack again, and then you stealth. So Jacko's a unit that if you're playing pretty aggressively, definitely consider her. She is the best of the bunch, and she's going to be viable for, I think, several seasons to come, because the playstyle that she enables is very aggressive, and she's very good at what she does. If you want a comparison, Jacko does essentially what Euphine does, except Jacko's a bit more flexible. Usually with Euphine, you use her with something like Zio, who can go first, silence somebody, and then push up the Euphine, so she can take the turn and nuke. For Jacko, she gets pushed up regardless of what debuff is being inflicted, so yeah, she'll just go ahead and increase her combat readiness by 30% after a opponent's target has a debuff on it. Right, so she's a pretty high priority if you are going for a cleave or a aggro playstyle. Definitely consider her. If you're going for a slower playstyle, then she might not really matter for you. If you know that you're going to stick to a tank down playstyle or you're sticking to a bruiser playstyle, not a super high priority, but nice to have, right? So out of all the Guilty Gear characters, I say number 1 priority would be Jacko. Number 2 is probably either Dizzy or Elfelt. They're kind of tied, and the lowest priority is gonna be Baiken, right? So let's go ahead and take a look at the artifacts. So we're gonna need to do some digging for these artifacts here, but Soul's artifact is actually pretty good, and you're gonna get it for free. It's right here. It's called Junkyard Dog. And this artifact's used a lot in Ancient Inheritance. If you guys watched Tristan Wolf, you'll know that Junkyard Dog is used in so many different team comps to fight the bosses, to inflict debuffs, to bypass their gimmicks. But you get this for free, so just make sure to max limit break it. It's definitely nice to have. Next up, because we're already here, let's talk about Jacko's artifact. So Jacko's symbol is actually really good. If you're familiar with Collab for mages, that just increases your damage output. It's like a rage set in an artifact, right? This is the exact same as Collab except for warriors. You get a little less damage for single target attacks only, and it just increases the effectiveness of all allies by a flat 10% as well. This artifact is really good, but is it a priority to have? Not necessarily. You don't need this. Portrait of the Saviors does similar, right? Similar amounts of damage, but slightly different conditions. Portrait works with AoE attacks too, whereas this only works with single target attacks, although you do get a little bit higher damage output compared to the Portrait's 20%. But yeah, in general, I think Jacko's symbol, not a super high priority to get, but if you are looking for an artifact like this to output damage on warriors, then you can consider it. But warriors have such amazing artifacts in general anyway. You know, we have things like Draco Plate and things like Sigurd's Scythe right here, which is very, very common. Recently, we've had, if you played the Slime collab, Benimaru's Tachi is amazing on so many different warriors. So there's a ton of great warrior artifacts, and Jacko's symbol just kind of pales in comparison to them. It's better, honestly, in PvE compared to PvP. So again, pretty low priority. Next up, let's talk about Baikon's artifact, Torn Sleeve. Don't even consider it. It's not really that great. People used to use Torn Sleeve. I used to use Torn Sleeve for things like Wyvern. We would use it to inflict extra debuffs so that the Wyvern only attacks the frontline unit and doesn't attack anybody else. But we're at the point now where so many people have their Wyvern teams optimized. Even if you're a newer player, it's super easy to optimize it with the units that you get that are 3 and 4 star, that really, the artifacts like this are absolutely unnecessary. Alright, next up we got Dizzy. So let me pull up Dizzy's Necro and Undyne here. Dizzy's artifact is never used, even on her. Again, mages have so many good artifacts that Necro and Undyne just kind of pales in comparison. In fact, mages have literally the best artifact in the game, the Tagahel's Ancient Book, that gives you 20 souls so you can soul burn immediately at the start of the battle. So why would you ever run Necro and Undyne when you could just get extra turns with Dizzy by running Book? Alright, and last but not least, we have Elfeld's artifact. So, I believe it is... Where is it? There it is, Misconfeel. So, Misconfeel here is Elfeld's artifact, and this is actually really, really good. Misconfeel is like Song of the Stars, except instead of putting a target debuff on the opponent, it has a chance to put a defense break on the opponent for a single turn after a single target attack. Now, this artifact is absolutely amazing for so many different rangers that are support units. If rangers have a target debuff already on their S1, this is fantastic to put on. If they are just a support unit in general, have a lot of single target attacks, you know, their S3, S1, S2, then you can definitely use this as well to just get some extra chances to defense break and help support your team in getting more damage out. This is great in PvE and in PvP, so out of all the Guilty Gear artifacts, I would highly recommend getting Misconfeel. She has the highest priority here, Elfeld's artifact, out of all of them, in my opinion. The second best artifact to get is definitely going to be Jacko's symbol here. Pretty useful in PvE and PvP content. So if you're able to, make sure to try to snag that from the powder shop. But of course, again, priority is going to be on the previous one, right? Next up we got, I would say, Dizzy's artifact. Super low priority, like don't even bother with this artifact because it's not that great, honestly. And then we also have... what was the last year? Oh, Baikon's artifact. Yeah, don't bother with Baikon's artifact either. Super low priority, pretty much worthless, and there's so many better things that you could be spending your powders on, right? So yeah, that pretty much covers all of the Guilty Gear units and their artifacts and their priorities. So let's move on into the ReZero collab. Thankfully, ReZero only has 3 units here, Rem, Rom, and Amelia. So let's start with the free unit, which is gonna be Rom. Rom's actually really strong, because the fact that she can not only defense break, but she also gives herself greater attack buff for 2 turns. She has a really good passive that increases her attack by 30% and decreases the effect of decreased combat readiness debuffs by 100% if you increase this to max. She's really good, by the way, in the ice expeditions. Mine's actually built for that. But yeah, outside of that, she's basically a PvE unit. She's a really good Banshee 13 one-shot unit as well, and her damage is quite considerable. It's quite easy to build for Banshee 13 one-shot, I believe. I think there's teams out there that don't use Rage Set on her either, just like with Baiken. So she should be a pretty accessible PvE unit, and she's free, so again, make sure to SSS her by just playing through the side story and trying to max out her artifact as well, but we'll get into that in a bit. Okay, next up, let's talk about Amelia. So, Amelia is a Soul Weaver, and she actually was meta for a good little while. She has some cleansing, some healing, and some barriers. Got some CR pushing, cleansing with attack buff, which is pretty nice, and an S1 that kind of heals a little bit as well. Now, Amelia is not really seen in today's meta. She could actually be okay if you wanted to use her in something like an aggro-based team. She also works in standard as well. The Amelias that I see running around occasionally, once every few months, they're on a slower, bulkier build with super high resistance, and she's used as a cleanser and as a unit to kind of enable your DPSs. Now, there are alternatives nowadays to Amelia. Even back then, DN was a pretty good contender, but after DN's buffs, I'd say DN's not bad, because she can push up the team with her S2, right, while cleansing and providing a barrier, much like Amelia's S3, and DN's S3 also provides an attack buff as well. Now, DN is a limited unit as well, so we also have Ahmed. Ahmed is great because she pushes up the entire team with her S2, gives skill null for the team, gives attack buff, crit damage buff to a single unit while pushing them up if you have her artifact, and you can still deal a ton of damage. I would say Ahmed kind of directly replaced Amelia in that role of being a really aggro-enabling, supportive Soul Weaver type of unit. The only thing that Ahmed doesn't have that Amelia does is healing, right? So you're going to need to run a healing artifact on Ahmed if you want to get the same effects as Amelia. But otherwise, Amelia, I would say, is kind of a middle priority target, not the highest in this situation, but if you like her, go for it. Alright, let's go ahead and talk about Rem real quick, because she used to be meta as well. There used to be something called the casino meta, where you would pick things like Violet and Rem, and other units that would just have evasion or counter shenanigans going on, and you would just pray that you procced a bunch of stuff, and if your opponent's unlucky, like me, back then, when I played that meta, that was awful. You would just lose all the time to just random counter procs and everything. But nowadays, she's kind of fallen off the meta. She's still used occasionally as like a anti-cleave pick, or you can actually use her against certain squishier teams, because she punishes them quite a bit, especially if you build her super bulky. But her demon mode is still very scary, because she becomes unaffected by debuffs and other effects, and she starts to ignore effect resistance. But overall, I would say Rem, middle priority, kind of on the same level priority as Amelia, I would say. If you like her, again, very popular character. I loved her in ReZero, but go for it. If not, if you don't really have any super hard feelings either way and you're strapped on resources, then don't. She's also used in things like Wyvern 13. You can use her in a bunch of one-shot teams, but what I would say to all the people out there who are considering one-shot teams, like with Baiken or with Rem, is if you're already strapped on resources and you're looking at you're watching a video like this seeing, hey, where should I spend my currency on, then you probably don't have enough resources to farm infinitely. If you're not whaling for packs and you're not buying leaf packs and sky stones out the wazoo to farm 24/7, if this limited side story was difficult for you as well to keep up because you didn't have the resources like sky stones or leaves to refresh stamina, then I would just suggest running a casual clear team. It doesn't have to be 100% success. It doesn't have to be a one-shot team. Those teams are more optimized for like hunt buff days, which are fine, but again, it's a lot of resources to invest for something that doesn't really matter, especially if you're struggling to just keep up with all these events and your energy requirements for them, right? So if you're low on energy and stuff, don't go for the one-shot teams. They're not going to help your energy situation. It's just going to go through your farming quicker, and then you're just going to be bored sooner, right? So yeah, that is going to be it for the ReZero units here. Let's go ahead and talk about their artifacts. Let's start with Rom's artifact. So Rom's artifact is actually this one, Severed Horn Wand. It's not really used at all, but I would recommend just getting it max limit broken because it's free anyway. It's not a terrible artifact for harder PvE content. You could probably use it in things like Abyss or Nightmare Labyrinth if you have a squishier mage unit that you're trying to bring along and the boss is dealing too much damage. It's not too bad to have, right? It also just increases your attack by 15%. This is not the best artifact for Rom anyway. In the Ice Expeditions, at least, I use Kalaldra with her so that she'll deal even more damage against defense broken and target debuffed units. Right, moving on, we got Amelia. So going to the Soul Weavers, this one right here, Guardian Ice Crystals. 10,000% yes. This is probably the highest priority artifact out of this entire double collaboration rerun, I would say, in my opinion. Guardian Ice Crystals is so strong, and the crazy thing is, you can actually have more than one Soul Weaver on a team running this. It won the World Championships in years past. I remember there was a Protect the Castle type of team where they had 1 DPS, 2 Soul Weavers, and a Knight for damage mitigation. And the DPS on the team was about like maybe 10-20% of their health and about to die. And the opponent poked at them with their support unit, and it didn't kill them. And because they had 2 max limit broken Guardian Ice Crystals on the Soul Weavers, that unit got healed to pretty much full health, and it was disgusting. Yeah, so it was pretty, it's a pretty strong artifact. It's an artifact that's a staple on units like Destina. You can also see it on various other Soul Weavers as well, pretty tanky in standard playstyles. So if you play slower, this artifact is pretty much a necessity, especially for, and a best in slot for like many Soul Weavers too. Right, there's nothing that really does what this does. It's kind of similar to like a Water's Origin, except it's not for the caster, it's not for the person holding it, it's for an ally that's attacked. Yeah, this is definitely the highest priority. I am going to be snagging another copy of this because I only have 1 copy as of right now. Yeah, this is definitely the top, the best thing to get. Now, with Rem's artifact, it's Azure Comment, so it's up here. There we go. Azure Comment is it's a decent artifact, actually. I do use it, but it is a warrior artifact, so do consider that. I would say it's kind of a lower priority. It's not super amazing, but it can be used in certain combos or cleave teams. It does give you some extra crit chance, but there's no extra damage output. So I would say be on the side of caution here. I do use it on my Straze to get additional crit chance that he needs to cap at 100%. And the CR push does help a little bit in terms of helping enable him to take his turn, because mine is a bit slower. But again, most people's Strazes nowadays are running Benimaru's Tachi. Azure Comment, no one really needs it as a staple, like as their best in slot. It's just something that you kind of use as a filler artifact, or if you need that crit chance desperately. I'd say it's a pretty low priority, low medium priority, not very high at all. But yeah, if you manage to get this when you summon for Rem, it's not the end of the world. It's actually pretty usable. So yeah, that is pretty much it for all of the collaboration units and their artifacts. So just to give you a quick rundown here, in terms of Guilty Gear's units, Jacko is the highest priority, followed by Dizzy and Elfelt, kind of tied for lowish priority, like low-medium priority. Biken's a really low priority, and Soul is free. For ReZero, I would say that... well, Amelia's a kind of middle-ish priority, middle-low priority. Rem's kind of, again, middle-low priority, not super important, but Rom is free, right? And based on all of their artifacts here, I would say that Elfelt's artifact, definitely a pretty good high-priority target to have. Jacko's comes at a close second for the Guilty Gear. Dizzy and Biken's artifacts, don't even consider them. They're not used at all. For ReZero's artifacts, we can see that Amelia's artifact, top tier, must get #1 priority, in my opinion. Get Amelia's artifact, super, super strong. And Rem's artifact is pretty low priority. But yeah, with that being said, guys, hopefully you found this video informative and helpful in terms of helping you make your decisions on what to summon for and what to save for. With that being said, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe for more Epic 7 content. And until next time, take care.